Hey, it's Jordan. Delighted to be joined by longtime indigenous activist, member of the Anishinaabe tribe, and you have been fighting Line 3, among other disastrous pipelines and fossil fuel projects that have been mostly going through treaty land over the years. And last year, you were thankfully, charges against you were dropped for your activism and trying to protect the water for Line 3, which is some of the dirtiest tar sands oil in the land going through Minnesota. For those that don't know about the fight against Line 3, could you kind of talk about what Line 3 pipeline is and that this was essentially, Bill McKibben called it game over for the climate if this went through?
Yeah, just a little bit of history and perspective. I mean, so first, I'm here, happy to be here with you and to visit a little bit. And I am, of course, a two-time vice presidential candidate, a Green Party candidate, for those who didn't know. And so I don't really, let's say, have a dog in this fight. I'm not a Republican or a Democrat, but I'm here for Mother Earth. And so I'm here, I'm happy to talk to you about kind of how we got to where we are, and in particular, Walz and the concerns about Line 3. So a little bit of background. Anishinaabe people are in the northern part of 5 American states, southern part of 4 Canadian provinces. We have a fifth of the world's water. Seems like something you'd want to protect, like the Great Lakes. You have a Canadian multinational, Enbridge, who has 75% of the tar sands coming into the United States from Canada, dirtiest oil in the world, not necessary, not needed. Who've been replumbing the North after they decided that they didn't, it was a U.S. policy because the largest oil reserves in the world are actually in Venezuela. I don't know if you know that, but
yeah.
But we don't do business with Venezuela, and we want to do politically bad things, and so we just replumb North America to get Canadian tar sands oil out and drag them across a bunch of indigenous territories and act like it's all good in domestic energy. It's not domestic energy; it's Canadian oil that shouldn't have ever left the ground, right? So a couple of years ago, there were 5 tar sands pipeline proposals, 5. And of those, 3 got in, or 2 got in. Let me just think of this. Energy East didn't happen. The Keystone XL didn't happen, right? Enbridge's project called the Northern Gateway also didn't happen. And so that meant that there's 2 pipelines that did get through, Trans Mountain, which we might as well just name it, Pierre Trudeau 2 or something like that, because, he financed it. He figured out how to make it happen. And that takes oil to the west so that they can sell to China and Western markets. And then the second one is Line 3, which was heavily battled and poses some really big problems to all of us. I mean, I'm interested in looking at the fact that, there's something called the FARA Act, which requires foreign agents to actually register. And so I'm wondering if the Canadian multinational Enbridge, which lobbied $8 million worth, $11 million worth of lobbying and $8.6 million worth of police, might have violated the Foreign Agent Act because, if you finance the police, that should be kind of a problem, I would think.
Yeah.
You have when you have foreign multinationals paying for your police force. And that's something that Tim Walz did. That's something that Tim Walz did and made happen. And so I just want to flag that for everybody else, because if the Minnesota model is the model for the future, where we're going to be, having Canadian multinationals finance our police in basically Wisconsin and Michigan, where they're going for Enbridge 5.0, which has huge trespass claims under the Bad River Reservation and has a pipe underneath the streets of Mackinac. They're going to try to enforce that with Canadian finance police again. And I think that that's a problem, and that's a problem that actually should be a national problem, not just a Minnesota problem, right? So they got. Let
me ask you about Tim Walz, because obviously the media and Democrats have been having a honeymoon with him. He's been painted as very progressive, kind of this Midwestern dude, wholesome. But by everything I've seen, he basically unleashed the police on you and other protesters and worked with Enbridge to do it.
No, that's exactly right. I mean, they sold their soul to the Canadian pipeline company, and just to point out, like, kind of just a mess it is. We're sitting here talking about energy issues. We're talking about like how you're going to save energy. Who's the largest energy consumer in the state of Minnesota? Well, that would be Enbridge, because moving sludge takes power. They use far more money than the city of Minneapolis, far more energy. So these are the kind of systemic questions that really need to be addressed for all of us. Like, what are we generating power for? Are you going to have a solar powered pipeline? I mean, that's basically what they're proposing, which is kind of backwards, to say the least, a solar powered tar sands pipeline. But Tim was part of this whole process, and he pitted labor against Native people. He did it. He did it himself. But and the fact is that there's more jobs in removing old pipelines. It was $2 billion to remove the old Line 3, which is just labor, not hardware. That's some real jobs for some real people. And instead of that, Tim called them essential jobs to put in a pipeline during a pandemic. Got 4,300 workers in that were mostly from out of state, and engineered an occupation of the North. 4,300 workers and $8 million worth of police, and a construction spread that went from the Red Lake Nation to Duluth. That's an occupation, and that's what it felt like on the ground. And all of us, 1,000 people who were charged, that was Tim. And he needs to take responsibility for it. But we're also looking at the next round of Tim, which is this strategic minerals. 75% of they're on indigenous lands, and everything that is the, unobtainium. We might as well just call it that, unobtainium, the stuff that they need for green energy. Well, a lot of that is in Minnesota, in the middle of our water. So how about we think about what we're doing? Because what I don't want to do is export our problems nationally with Tim Walz's bad ideas. And I think that these are like national discussions. Now, I say that all as criticisms of Tim Walz. Now, just remember that in the spectrum where I live, which is the deep north, that's what it is. It's the deep north. Racism, Trump flew into Bemidji in his last election. Why do you fly into a town of 10,000 people unless you got a lot of haters that are going to join you? Tim Walz is in the middle of that. But in the spectrum, North and South Dakota are full of Indian hating governors, right? Should I just say that? Wisconsin has a good governor but a bad legislature, which is really bad towards Indian people. And Tim Walz is lieutenant governor is a Native woman. If Tim Walz goes to Washington, we have the first Native woman governor in the United States and the first woman governor of Minnesota. So on some level, there's a lot of Indian people that are like, send Tim to Washington. A lot of the policies that he did were not bad. He was heavily influenced by a lot of good people. And, I would say that basically he's done a decent job on many issues, except for his lack of vision, his lack of really understanding of economics, long-term sustainable economics, and pitting labor against Native people, and his lack of absolute appreciation for the water of the region. That's pretty clear. Right. And so that's my concern about Tim.
And let me ask you, because you ran for Green Party, but it all seems to be theater to me. The Democratic Party, they run on, wind, solar, fighting the climate crisis, but Biden doubled drilling on public land when he ran on banning drilling on public land. Obama infamously bragged that he exported the most, natural gas of any president. And Trump, of course, has said, drill, baby, drill. But the scam of it all is, none of this is causing energy independence. This is all just, like you said, being routed and threatening your lands to then be sold to China and other countries. So where is the energy independence of any of it?
Well, I think we need to talk about late stage fossil fuel addiction. That's what this is. This is addictive behavior. When you just keep trying to fill your fix and you look for new places to fill the same fix. The question is why do we have this fix to fill? Why are we transporting food 1,400 miles from farmer to table? That'd be one question. Why are we powering tar sands pipelines with solar? You want to answer that one for me? Why are we, all this new AI stuff? That's a huge energy suck in our region. Like, how much of it do we actually need? These kind of decisions, there's no conscious decision making. There's just like a fill the need and continue with the inefficiencies. The fact is that America spends about 70% of its energy is lost between point of production and point of consumption. That's according to Lawrence Livermore Labs. We have the most wasteful energy system in the world, and we're still trying to fulfill it. And I'm like, why don't you fix your act up? Why don't you fix up your infrastructure, relocalize it, make it somewhat resilient? That's what a visionary plan would look like. Now, with all of that said, I have to say that, as much disdain as I've had for Biden, particularly in terms of Palestine, I have to say that he's kind of the whole of the donut in the Biden administration. He appointed some really rock star Native people who are doing really good work. National Park Service, You got Chuck Sams, head of the National Park Service. You obviously have Deb Howland, up there. You got the Western Area Power Administration is Tracy LeBeau. That's in charge of all the power that's held by the feds in the West. Well, her reservation was flooded by WAPA. So she knows what we're talking about. So there's some really good people that were appointed by the Biden administration, kind of the whole of the donut, that guy, Biden. And, what I would like to see is the vision that a lot of those people have implemented, because those people are visionary, and actually really tackling the systemic causes of the not just the systemic causes, but the systemic issues of inefficiency in the system. And then the real need for having labor that does meaningful work. I mean, and labor that does something useful. Like take me, I'm a hemp farmer. I don't know if you know this about me. I'm a fiber hemp farmer, right? Got a bag, came out with Patagonia last year, fabulous bag. We had to ship that stuff all around the world to get it processed. Well, why don't we have a textile industry in this country? That's workers. Minnesota used to have a textile industry. Used to be able to weave, do the whole works here. Don't do that. There's very little because it's all been offshore. So what I'd like to see is some kind of a vision for a real self-reliant, sustainable, durable, low energy, equitable economy. That's what I'd like to see. And I think that most Americans would like to see the same thing.
Absolutely. And we're almost a decade, believe it or not, from the Standing Rock protest. That was 8 years ago. They're still fighting in court, the Standing Rock Sioux tribe, to defeat DAPL. And frankly, I mean, when charges were dismissed against yours, a judge actually cited your tribe's treaty rights, which was a breath of fresh air. Can you talk about, as the DNC goes on, they're addressing the Black community, they're addressing the Hispanic community. I hear lip service from Democrats on, the indigenous rights, indigenous communities, but I don't see a lot of policy. I mean, there were some good things from Biden, the infrastructure deal, and had some more rural broadband to reservations, more electricity. But overall, are you seeing enough, obviously not for the Republican Party, but for the Democratic Party on treaties, but more importantly, actual, economic relief to the most impoverished areas in our country?
Yeah, I mean, thanks for your question. I mean, I just went back and took a look. I just went back to Standing Rock, just to say, hey, how's it going out here? 8 years later, what's it looking like? And the fact is that they just did the draft environmental impact statement. That would be last November for the pipeline that they put in 2017. I mean, what kind of a backwards policy is that? Would you like to explain to me how anyone is supposed to believe that there's a working system? I mean, Army Corps of Engineers violated. I was an expert witness in the federal trial. And I was like, they asked, I testified on behalf of the federal government. And I was like, you guys are, you issue nationwide permits for 212 river crossings without even reviewing them. It was an absurd process. So we actually want a system that works. If you want to be big boys and say you own the country, well, act like you're taking care of something. Treaties are these whole larger territories where we have maintained and cared for them and hunted and fished and worked for our whole lives, plus each generation before. We have not seen any semblance of care by the federal government. And so, have a system that works and actually do some restoration work and support Native people. I mean, you're seeing the return of some wildlife refuges, to Native people. We'd like the Tamarack Refuge back in northern Minnesota. The Chippewa National Forest, they returned 11,000 acres of it. Well, what about the other 4,000 acres that you hold? And what about the rest of the land you're holding up there? I mean, land back is a really significant issue for many Native people. And then give us the funding to manage the damn parks. We can manage them just fine, thank you, but give us the funding to do it in a meaningful way. So equity and putting lip service, like I'm very grateful and very proud of the beginning of Land Back that Deb Howland has begun to manifest, right? Keep it up, make it bigger, stand by it, return lands that are stolen by the feds, held by the feds, and then give us the resources that we are due to take care of those, So many things could be done. I mean, I think all of us, like I said, I'm not a Democrat and I'm not a Republican, but I did breathe a sigh of relief when Joe Biden stepped back. I was like, whew, that's at least something, that's at least something, because a couple of old white guys who represent a bunch of bad ideas is not somebody that's very easy to organize for.
Right. And my last question, obviously, it doesn't get a lot of attention. And as of now, many presidents have chosen not to pardon or commute Leonard Peltier's sentence. He's almost 80. He's been in prison for 50 years. Is not in great health. And there is no evidence he committed the crimes he is in prison for. Biden has the opportunity on his way out to do the right thing here. But Leonard Peltier just had his most recent parole request denied. What is your message to the Democratic Party?
Joe Biden should pardon him. Joe Biden should let Leonard Peltier out of jail. He has done plenty of time for a crime that he did not commit. And the real crime was the COINTELPRO era that caused the chaos and the murders, the 300 murders on the Pine Ridge Reservation, Fred Hampton, Mumia, all these guys in jail from COINTELPRO. That's the crime. And I don't want to see a return to COINTELPRO, but what I want to see is Leonard Peltier gets a pardon. And that would be a courageous thing for Joe to do on his way to his retirement.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Winona LaDuke. I botched it before, but Anishinaabe tribe member, and I really appreciate you taking the time.
No, thank you so much for the call, and let us pray and work like hell, right?
Absolutely. Take care.
Thank you.